welcome to SophieCo, me, Sophie Shevardnadze. Hungary's vow to fight for the transparency of foreign-backed groups working in the country has been met by disapproval in Brussels. An outspoken critic of EU policies, Budapest is refusing to toe the line on refugees, ties with Russia and other issues. Can Hungary continue to put its own interests before Europe's? Well, Hungary's Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó is with me today to discuss this.
The Hungarian government isn't shying away from confronting EU leaders after Brussels stepped up regulations, imposed refugee quotas and hurtful sanctions. For years, it has been a skeptical voice on European matters. But now, with America's new president promising to stay off the liberal course, will the ruling conservatives in Budapest be emboldened? Can the rise of alternative parties across Europe prop up Hungary's voice in the Union? And what kind of transformation can these new voices offer?
Peter Szijjártó, Hungary's Foreign and Trade Minister, it's great to have you here on our program. Welcome.
My pleasure, thank you.
So we'll start from the latest. Budapest has vowed to sweep out any foreign NGOs funded by American billionaire Soros. I know that he nowadays funds more than 60 groups like that. How dangerous are those organizations for your country?
Well, actually, there's a very unfair and unjust approach being spread, actually, which tries to say that it is really the NGOs which represent the people of a given country, which is a very dangerous approach because it's not true. There have never been any elections taken place where NGOs would have run. So there were no people voting for, I want this NGO to represent me or I want that NGO to represent me. People vote on politicians, on political parties. So it's the parliament and it is the government which represent the people of given countries. So actually we think that, this approach that NGOs would represent the society is very dangerous, number one. Number two, there's a very clear and fair, by the way, demand towards politics to be transparent. And I think that it's not only politics which should be transparent, but all organizations which have an impact on public affairs, on political or social issues, must be transparent as well, because the people have a right to know whom these NGOs, whom these organizations actually represent. So that's why we want to say that if there are NGOs in the country which are financed by foreign citizens, by other countries, by other governments, horribile dictu, then it should be known to the people.
But who are these local groups? I mean, you must have some knowledge to be so worried and to want to close them down. Who do they represent? Because Soros says he will continue working with local groups despite government's opposition.
Well, actually, what we say is that they have to be transparent. People have to know that if there are NGOs which would like to influence their opinion, their approach, their understanding towards politics, then these people have to know whom these NGOs represent.
So
that's what we want to know.
The little groups that...
Well, actually, we do know that George Soros founds or finances a lot of organizations in Hungary. He has a very clear, let's say, attempt or a very clear interest, because he has already announced it and spoke about this very openly, that he would like this government to fail. He would like to kind of fire this government because he doesn't like our approach, doesn't like our policies. But I mean, it's not George Soros who have to make a decision what government leads Hungary, it's the Hungarian people. So actually we find it very anti-democratic if someone from abroad would like to influence Hungarian voters whom to vote for.
But when George Soros says more than ever he's going to cooperate with the small groups, that in a way means that he's going to go against government's will. How is that going to play out? Well, actually,
he has a very clear intention. That's definitely true. But I think it's an obvious right of a country, obvious right of a government to protect the country from external influence. This is what we have heard a lot from US in the last months, that external influence is so dangerous when another country would like to influence political procedures of another country. So I think then it's a good reason that we say that if this is American position, that it can be our position as well. That if factors people, persons, businessmen of another country would like to influence political procedures in another country, from that we have to protect ourselves.
But if you're saying you're going after NGOs, you can't just go after Soros-funded NGOs. You'll probably have to go after other NGOs like Greenpeace as well. You ready to do that?
Well, my position is that that we have to ensure level playing fields. So double standards we don't like. So actually, there must not be, of course, a regulation to NGOs which are funded by George Soros. There must be a general regulation on NGOs which oblige all non-governmental organizations to be transparent and to unveil whom they are funded by. Actually, you know, I wouldn't say funny because it's too serious to say that, but abbreviation NGO stands for non-governmental organizations, and in many cases it turns out that maybe letter N is not appropriate there, because many times other governments or other organizations which are affiliated to other governments actually fund these kind of organizations. As George Soros had a very clear and tight cooperation with Democrats, with the Clinton family, and he clearly had a strong influence on U.S. foreign policy. He clearly had a strong influence on the policy of Clinton family. So actually, I don't think that NGO means NGO is the right abbreviation in this regard, because
so
I mean, considering them non-governmental is too much.
Preventive measure more than anything, right? Because you feel like these organizations can really influence your country's foreign policy.
No,
I understand that right?
Yeah. I mean, actually, these NGOs can, externally, influence internal life, social, political life of our country. And if this is the case, then we have to know who they are.
But here's the tricky part, though, because Hungary's ruling party has also benefited from Soros-funded NGOs before they came to power. So if it was okay to work with him then, what has changed since?
No, I mean, many of current political leaders or politicians have had scholarships from Soros Foundation, and with that, many of us have studied abroad in US, UK. But I mean, giving scholarships to study abroad, see the world, get skills and experiences, and come back is not the same than funding NGOs directly who are working against the government. It's two totally different things.
American incoming President Donald Trump has been also a very vocal critic of Soros and his NGOs around the globe. Do you feel like with him in the office it's going to be easier for Hungary to get rid of this Soros Foundation in your country?
Well, what I can tell you is the following, that the political relationship between US and Hungary during recent years were at the deepest points. There were very clear attempts from United States to interfere in our internal issues. Just to give you an example, I was given a two-page non-paper from one of the high-ranking officials of the State Department during my first visit to US as a foreign minister. This two-pager contained some measures which US government expected us to do in Hungary in order to make it possible to enhance political relationship. But come on, I mean, it's too much. It's interference in our internal issues, because these papers were not about bilateral cooperation. These were clearly about internal issues, laws, regulations in Hungary. Although our economic and defense military cooperation have been perfect, this political relationship was very bad. So now we have a hope that this political relationship will improve. And as our position regarding migration, our position regarding the role of foreign policy is pretty similar with Donald Trump, we have a good hope that this political relationship will improve.
We're going to talk about US-Hungary relationship in just a bit. Just to finish with Soros, your party has also said that Soros-funded NGOs is helping bring to Hungary illegal immigrants. How is he doing that, and why would Soros need so many immigrants in Hungary?
Well, what I understand from my colleagues, since I don't supervise intelligence agencies, is that there were organizations which helped illegal migrants to find ways to Hungary, to find where they could violate our border, to find out how to apply for asylum status, and these reports have said that George Soros was in the background for these
so what's the reasoning behind it? Why would he want all these illegal immigrants in Hungary?
Well, since I'm not him, I cannot tell you that. I just can tell you what I have heard.
I've spoken to former Czech President Václav Klaus, and he actually says that EU elites want an influx of refugees in Europe, which is weird because looking now, I mean, the whole refugee problem is about to cost top politicians their seats in Europe. Why are they still so supportive of this open door policy? What do you think?
Well, you know, I wouldn't speak about refugees, I would speak about migrants because, you know, we are bordered with, from the south, we are bordered with peaceful countries, Croatia, Serbia, from where migrants have entered Hungary, like 400,000 people in 2015. I mean, how can someone be considered as a refugee in Hungary who comes from Serbia or comes from Croatia to Hungary? I mean, there's no war in Croatia, no war in Serbia. So I think that these people might not be considered as refugees. They might be considered as refugees in the neighboring country where they escape from if there's a war there. But definitely not in Serbia, Hungary, Croatia, Macedonia. So why European Union I mean, carries out this open door policy? You should ask the high-ranking officials in Brussels. What I know is that it's a bad policy. It's harming European Union, it's dangerous, because this policy of open borders actually undermines security and safety in Europe. Currently, we are experiencing a threat of terror more serious than ever in Europe. Even more than 1.5 million illegal migrants enter the territory of European Union without knowing who they are. And our question was whether this fact gives the opportunity for terrorist organizations to send their terrorists to Europe or not. But if you speak like this, you're going to be attacked immediately in Western European media, saying that you say that migration equals terrorism, which we never say. But we say that yes, this uncontrolled and unregulated massive influx of migrants gave the opportunity for terrorist organizations to send their terrorists to Europe.
I feel like, you know, Western countries would have counter arguments to your argument, saying that, for instance, if we take just your country, yeah, your police has arrested, if I'm correct, a Belgian and a Frenchman who are going to join ISIS. They weren't refugees, and the last terror attack in Budapest was also committed by a local guy, a Hungarian guy. So they will tell you that terrorism is not necessarily a refugee or migrant thing, it's a homegrown thing.
It can be homegrown, but my question is that if there's a massive influx of 1.5 million people without knowing who they are, with opening the green borders for them, please come on in, without controlling them, does it give the opportunity for terrorist organizations to send their terrorists easily to Europe? Yes, it does. And actually, this whole migration crisis has made it very clear that old taboos and dogmas must be overcome. So far, you better didn't speak about unsuccessful patterns of immigration in European Union, in Western Europe. But now it turned out that yes, there have been double societies or parallel societies constructed. There are problems with immigration of former migrants in Western European societies. We have to speak about this openly. We think that this solution between quotation marks based on quotas is totally unimplementable. It's totally against common sense. We have to be able to protect ourselves. We have to be able to make a decision whom we let enter the territory of our country and whom we do not let.
So, Foreign Minister, we're going to take a short break right now. When we're back, we'll continue talking to Peter Szijjártó, Hungary's Foreign and Trade Minister, talking about the challenges Hungary is facing within the EU. Stay with us.
About your sudden passing, I've only just learned. You wore yourself thin, taking your last wrong turn. Your act got up to you as we all knew it would. I'd tell you I'm sorry, if only I could. So I write these last words in hopes to put to rest these things that I never got off my chest. I remember when we first met, my life turned on each breath. But then my feelings started to change. You talked about war like it was a game. Still, some were fond of you, those that didn't like to question or argue. And I secretly promised to never be like you. It's said one does not leave a funeral the same as one enters. The mind gets consumed with death, but this one quite differs. I speak to you now because there were no other takers. To proclaim that mainstream media has met its maker.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is exit case number ARB.
ISDS, Investment State Dispute Settlement, is a part of the TTIP negotiations. It enables companies to sue countries and force national governments to choose between interests of people and corporations.
Western European countries designed this arbitration system to protect their assets in the former colonies once the colonies obtained their independence.
Free trade collides with free will.
Foreign commercial interests sometimes are very powerful, and they could put pressure on a democratically elected government.
Is there a way out of a damaging treaty?
Many of the people were talking about, well, if we cancel it, it's going to make us vulnerable to an ISDS case. So you have this massive way of levering sovereign governments into not doing policies by just threatening them with ISDS cases.
TTIP, might is right.
And we're back with Hungary's Foreign and Trade Minister Peter Szijjártó talking about Hungary and the problems it's facing today. Mr. Foreign Minister, so let's talk about the mandatory quotas that Hungary refuses to obey. Luxembourg's Foreign Minister actually even said that, you should be excluded from the EU for that. Are you worried at all that this may lead to that if you disobey Brussels?
No, of course, because actually the decision about obligatory or mandatory quota is breaking European regulations, because mandatory quota system means the amendment of the Dublin Treaty, and Dublin Treaty cannot be amended by a majority decision of ministers of interior. If you would like to change the treaties, then you have to go a very complicated process with national ratifications, parliament ratifications at the very end. So actually this decision about mandatory quota is unimplementable, because just put into consideration Hungary, we are a Schengen member state. So if there's a decision that number of ex-migrants have to be settled in Hungary, then the next day they can leave Hungary towards Slovakia or Austria without any problem, because we are Schengen zone countries, or to Slovenia. Number one. Number two, it's against common sense, because obligatory quota is kind of an encouragement, an invitation to people that come to Europe because you're gonna be distributed. Instead of stopping the influx. And number three is breaking European regulations. So these three reasons were way enough for us to go to the European Court to challenge this ruling.
Yeah, but just because this open door policy is so widely saluted by the Western states, when your Prime Minister, Mr. Orbán, comes out and says, bringing in migrants to my country equals to national suicide, I'm thinking maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, because, mandatory quotas, if you obey them, would only maybe bring, 1,300 migrants to a country? You're a country of 10 million people.
Yeah,
Is it really like national suicide?
No, but there are tricks in that. Because first, it was said in Brussels that, okay, there will be a quota system, but voluntary. Then it was said, okay, quota system not voluntary, mandatory. Then it was said, okay, it will be a mandatory quota about 120,000. Then it was said, yeah, mandatory quota about 160,000. And then financial penalty to those who don't apply. So actually, these are tricks. And it's very clear and obvious that the Western European political elites, that Brussels, the institutions, want more and more people to come, want an unlimited illegal migration to European Union, for which mandatory quota would be the gate opener. And we just simply don't want it.
So, I mean, you turned into one of the main transit routes for hundreds of thousands of migrants, and your country was criticized for putting up fences, but you weren't the only one. I mean, there are Austria, Slovakia, Sweden, Denmark, we have Belgium, who also introduced controls. Is this the only way to put up fences?
Well, actually, you know, we are a member of the Schengen zone, which means that there's a free movement inside the Schengen zone if you cross the borders according to regulations. But in order to be able to preserve that, you have to protect yourself externally. So when you join the Schengen zone, then you sign up to some obligations. And we have an external border, you know, and the Schengen Code says that if you are located on an external border, you have to make it sure that your border is only crossed through the official border crossing points during opening hours, even if you said during opening hours. So actually, we have like more than 500 kilometers of land border, mainly flat, towards Croatia, towards Serbia, so non-Schengen member states. There's no other possibility than some physical obstacle to comply with the Schengen regulations. And you know, when this whole crisis broke out, we posed the question in Brussels, whether this extraordinary situation gives us the excuse, you know, not to comply with the Schengen regulations. And it was said, no, you have to comply with all the regulations. Then we put up the fence to comply with the regulations, and then we were accused very badly. So it's like, it's tragical, let's say.
But are you pro-Schengen or against Schengen? Because after a tragic string of terrorist attacks in Europe, for instance, after the German Christmas attacker was shot in Italy, countries like Italy and France started talking about maybe going back to the former European borders because, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. What do you think should be done? Should you go back to the former European borders?
No, actually, we are pretty much interested in preserving the Schengen zone, because if the Schengen zone collapses, then it's a suicide for European economy. Because the European industry is mainly based on the methodology of just-in-sequence and just-in-type production, which means that we need the free movement for goods and products. If you cannot ensure that, then the whole European economy will suffer huge losses. So our interest is to keep Schengen zone, but in order to be able to keep Schengen, to maintain Schengen zone, we have to strengthen the external protection of Schengen zone. That's what we have been working on. And that's why we don't like these kind of double standards, you know, that many times we are accused of protecting the external border, and on the other hand, saying that, well, Schengen zone might die because there are too many people coming, you know.
You also said that by protecting its borders, Hungary is protecting Europe,
Sure.
Europe's security, especially Germany. Is your country getting any help from the EU, being at the forefront of all this?
Very minimum. Just, you know, the only serious support we received from our Central European friends. So when it was about closing or sealing off our green border, because, you know, many times it is said that we close our border. It's not true, because we have the border crossing ports where you can enter the territory of country, of course, respecting regulations. When we sealed off the green border, there were only 3 countries, Poland, Czech Republic and Slovakia, who have helped us by technical assistance and by human resources, manpower. Only 3 countries.
So your government wants to take it an extra stretch further and wants to limit the freedom of movement of those migrants who are already in the country, in Hungary. And Mr. Orbán has come out and said that he understands that this really goes against all European, but he's still willing to take the risk. How will the EU retaliate if Hungary does go against the rules?
You know, there's a very heavy contradiction in European Union, because Dublin Treaty says that if you enter the territory of European Union illegally, and if you submit request for asylum, you have to stay on the territory of that given country, wait until your procedure is over, and the decision is made whether you get asylum status or not. So these people who entered territory of Hungary submitted asylum, request for asylum, and they left immediately. Because of European regulations, you cannot keep them, but on the other hand, European Union obliges you to comply with the Dublin Treaty, which says that they have to stay on the soil of your country. But I mean, if you cannot make any kind of, let's say, measures in order to keep them there, how to comply with European regulations? So actually, from our perspective, this was the reasoning for this proposal.
I want to talk a bit about the new president-elect of America, Donald Trump. EU officials reacted adversely to his elections. However, your prime minister was very enthusiastic about him being the new president, and he even got an invitation to visit Washington. Do you feel like Orbán's friendship with Trump will further complicate Hungary's relations with the EU?
Well, I mean, I don't think that, because you will see that there will be all European politicians looking for the friendship of Donald Trump, of course, because whether they like it or not, he is the president of the United States. And I see that there's a huge frustration within the Western European and liberal American political elite as well, that it turned out very clearly that it's not them, it's not liberal Western media, it's not liberal Western political elites, but American citizens who make a decision who's going to be president of the United States. And I can tell you that if a Democrat, if a liberal president said the same things as Donald Trump has said, then the whole European media would celebrate him as such a progressive, such a wonderful, such a smart guy. But as it's Donald Trump, actually now he's bashed by every sentence, which I don't think would be fair and correct. Yeah, we were enthusiastic, we were, I mean, happy with him winning, although it was nothing to do with us because it's American citizens, so we would have respected their decision anyhow. But of course we were happy with his election victory because of two main issues, that regarding migration and foreign policy, he represents, I mean, we represent pretty similar position than his positions.
And elections are coming up also in France, Germany, Netherlands, and I mean, everyone sees this shift to the right. And even though the people that are anti-establishment forces may not win these elections, do you feel like Europe will continue business as usual, or these new political forces have the power to change the EU from within?
Well, actually, there's a very serious debate going on within European Union about the future of EU, and it's no wonder because it's challenging times. And there's a kind of fight or debate between two camps, sovereignists and federalists. And we say, who belong to the sovereignists, of course, that European Union can only be strong if the member states are strong. And there should be no more authority brought to the level of Brussels. And if there are more and more governments saying this, then of course it will come to a change within the European Union. All of us, all 27, 28, agree that we want strong European Union. The only question is how to get there. Our position is that only strong member states can lead to a strong European Union.
My last question is regarding Russian sanctions. The unity of the EU has been tested by the issue of Russian sanctions. And there are countries like Hungary, Austria, Greece, Italy. They don't want the sanctions, but they were obliged to support their European partners on that. Do you feel like maybe with the changing political climate in Europe and the US, these sanctions will come to an end? Because they are harming Europe.
Well, you know, we were always very clear that we were very unhappy with the sanctions because we see no forward progress regarding Minsk agreements because of sanctions. We see many damages caused to European economies, including Hungarian economy. So I think sanctions have been proven unsuccessful, although we never used our veto right because we didn't want to break European unity. But I really do hope that in the future, at least, there will be a possibility to evaluate the sanctions, to have a highest possible level of discussion about the impacts of the sanctions. So far it was not given, unfortunately, and I really do hope that there will be a more pragmatic, more rational cooperation between US and Russia. There will be a more strategic cooperation between these two countries, and if this is the case, then I really do hope that the European approach will change as well.
Foreign Minister, thank you very much for this interview. Good luck with everything.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.